Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we are back with another Total War Saga Troy video. The embargo's finally dropped and now we can start dropping some content on the MYTHOS DLC. Now a bunch of new mythic units have been added to Troy through this DLC. You can see them here on screen right now and we will talk about them in just a small bit. But first, before anything, I think we should go back and look at the old pseudo-mythic units as they've also been transformed and now we have an actual mythological army. There are two types of flying Harpy units, Harpies and Harpy Fiends. Their stats themselves aren't too impressive in all honesty, but then again they are incredibly fast and flying units. They're not a unit that you're going to be using constantly unless you want to have something flying which can go around and pick off any straggling ranged units and so on. They're not bad in any way, shape or form, as yes, while their stats are not fantastic, they're still able to do a decent amount of damage on the ground, and they have a 50% plus missile resistance whilst they're flying, which is absolutely fantastic, as obviously in the Warhammer series, flying units always become a massive target, and these were going to become one too. An interesting note here is they also have a fairly unique ability where they'll actually get much more powerful if they are routing enemies nearby. So if you use these to go and snipe out any straggling archers and so on, they'll actually perform rather well. Sirens are also a flying unit, very much like Harpies, but a lot weaker. You're going to get them in smaller numbers, and they're not there to do a lot of damage, let's be very honest about that. Decent skirmishers, but just nothing too fantastic. They do have an interesting ability, however, known as Siren's Lure, which can make an enemy go berserk, so if you're trying to break up enemy lines and force them to go to you, this works rather well. I've been using Sirens every so often as I've been playing through this MYTHOS DLC, and yeah, you can use them, they're just not something that you're going to be using in every single army. Harpies kinda do a bit more. Centaurs are actually Centaurs now, so half man, half horse, and you have access to 7 different types of them, each of them with their own battlefield capabilities. Some pretty hard-hitting lancers, some bowmen, and so on. It's actually pretty much just replacing any type of cavalry, let's just be honest about that, as of course there's no real cavalry units unless you're playing as the Amazons. Cavalry units are fairly popular in the Total War series, and the Centaurs kind of bring a bit of extra flair to them. Decently fast, they mostly have charging capabilities and so on, all very useful for hit and run. It very much depends on how you want to use your tactics in-game, but honestly, they are pretty good. It is important to note, however, that of course they are Centaurs, they're half men, half horse, and they don't really have a lot of armor, so if you're trying to use this as heavy cavalry, yeah, it's not going to work out. I think the most I saw in terms of armor was 45 without any sort of upgrades or chevrons or something. It's still fairly decent, but just nothing that you can do to directly charge into a line of spears. Though if you prefer skirmishing type of combat and so on, this is actually pretty good. It's very similar to that of, say, for example, the Beastmen or certain high elf builds in Total War Warhammer, where you can constantly keep moving and doing some damage. You'll have also noticed by now that the Centaur Elders have a rather interesting unit formation. It keeps them going around in circles and so on, so they're able to fire on the move. This is decent when it goes to skirmishing combat and so on. I use this often when putting my troops in between 2 different types of skirmishing battles so they can just keep firing at different locations, but keep in mind that they will get targeted at some point. Giants remain largely the same. Get it? Nah, just jokes aside, it just seems that they haven't really changed. Well, in all honesty, they didn't really need to, because, yeah, giants, they were always represented to be quite large in the Truth Behind the Myth version, so in the same thing with MYTHOS, it would be the same. It would have been better if they were a bit larger, but hey, you know, they've got the same battlefield role. You've got 4 different types of giants, 1 ranged and 3 other melee, all of them pretty hard hitting, and yeah, they're just heavy infantry in all honesty. Use them to smash into your enemy lines and you're pretty much golden. They've also got a special healing ability too, which is pretty good, though keep in mind it makes them a massive target on the battlefield. And now we've got some heavy-duty lion furries. These are, well, very heavy infantry-styled units that are pretty devastating in flanking combat. It's actually where they heavily excel at due to a variety of different buffs where you will want to keep them in the flank as much as possible. The fact is that they're also decently fast, so you won't have a problem going around your enemy and hitting them from the side. These units also have a pretty good debuff on enemy units, which can reduce their morale. It's AoE too, and it covers quite a large distance, so you can actually throw these guys right into the side of the enemies and then just do this buff to make them take heavy morale damages. If you're looking for something a bit more tanky, you've got the Spatoy here, and these excel at being able to do a lot of damage but also take damage too. They are, well, essentially made out of stone, so they're quite durable. You'll also have a rather powerful healing ability which can even resurrect fallen warriors, but it will make sure that these units cannot move, so you're going to have to plan out when you can do this, though 300 HP points per second is actually quite good. They've got high morale, but this is because they're treated in a very similar sense to that of the undead in Total War Warhammer, that they, instead of dying by just routing, they'll end up being able to crumble, so you have to keep their morale high up if possible. Alright, so now we're going to start moving on to the really big boys, and first we've got the Cyclops, who is actually classed as a gargantuan unit. This is a real big damage dealer, able to do quite a lot of damage, but take a lot of damage too. He's got pretty much no armor. He's able to buff himself to make himself more terrifying in close combat, has a pretty powerful debuff, but keep in mind that this not only affects enemies, but it affects your units too, and lastly, he can throw a big rock, and yeah, I mean, why not? The rock itself also does not count as ammunition, so you're able to do this as long as the cooldown keeps ticking, which is pretty good if you can get it in a vantage point and you're just hitting your enemies from afar, but then again, you want this up close and personal. Now we've got the Minotaur, who isn't just some dude in a fursuit. So, yeah, this character, well, single entity monster better yet said, is focused around mostly dueling, though he's able to do quite a decent amount of damage to the enemy without too much of a problem. Spears will of course be the bane of his existence, but he's still able to hold up his own. Decent amount of HP, a lot of morale, very fast, and obviously a lot of damage to be able to output there. His abilities will focus around mostly damage output, but there is of course a morale debuff too, which only affects the enemies. It does not affect your units, so this one is probably a bit better than that of the Cyclops. Again though, I'd say that the Minotaur himself excels at taking out single entities, so put him to fight enemy generals, or of course other Minotaurs and so on, and yeah, it's a bit better than having him fight a bunch of spear units. The Griffin Patriarch is the first of the new monsters that we'll be checking out. It's a pretty beefy flying chicken, able to buff up your own units with a decent buff and also a gust of wind attack, which, yeah, is pretty decent. It's kind of like having your own personal Pidgeotto. You can see from its stats that it's very much built to do damage, and it's incredibly fast on the air. Not only that, if you prefer to have it on the ground, there is a land option now, which is absolutely fantastic, as obviously this was requested for Warhammer 3, so it's nice to see that this was brought into Troy, possibly to test it out. Like I said, it's quite the powerhouse. In fact, through my testing, I was pretty much just beelining for anything which was quite the tasty target for the bird and let it do its damage, and it did it very well. The Lesser Griffin, as you can expect, works in a very similar way as to that of the Griffin Patriarch. However, the Lesser Griffin you can recruit in multiple numbers, so yeah, if you want to start getting more of these and doing loads of damage, hey, these work out really well. It's also a great way to have different units and different armies and so on. They can do quite a lot of damage, and they're great for hunting down enemy leaders, pretty much. If you can manage to get an enemy leader just alone for a few minutes, I'd say more or less, you can snipe him out with a Griffin. That is, of course, unless your enemy has a Griffin too, and then you're up for an aerial dogfight. Now we've got 3 units here, and despite the fact that they look very much human, they are mythic, as they've only got one eye, so yeah, apparently that's just all you need. The Aramis themselves do have multiple different types of uses in the battlefield. You've got them on horses, you've got them with giant spears, and you've got them with a little bit of range too on foot. The benefit of these units themselves is the fact that they don't suffer any negatives from terrain, and the Troy maps generally have a lot of different types of terrain, so you can benefit from this if you want to move around and still have skirmishing armies and so on. They are pretty decent as far as I've seen, but I've been favoring a different type of units which we'll cover soon. But you'll also notice that these units can also, well, one specific unit can throw some bear traps in a sense, which is kind of cool. It's a trap, it's a deployable, it's something we haven't seen in a while. The Hydra, as far as I'm aware, is the biggest beastie out there throughout this DLC, and well, you can already see her next to, well, some servants, and yeah, she's massive, and that's kinda cool. Typical multi-headed giant snake, very intimidating on the battlefield, with a few interesting special abilities, like for example, if you attack the Hydra directly, your units will take damage too, as well, you know, poison blood and stuff like that. This is an effect which carries on to all the Hydra worshippers too, which we'll cover in just a few moments. And you've also got a special breath weapon, because, you know, breath weapons are very popular with serpentine animals, and a rather large explosive poison bomb, and it does a lot of damage, believe me. It's actually quite powerful. I'd say that the Hydra might be one of the strongest, though they're all in a very similar power level. We won't stay too long discussing the Hydra Servants, as the majority of them, they're pretty much just reskins in a sense, but don't worry about that, there's a reason for that. These are people who have started worshipping the Hydra and drinking her blood, which is why they look quite sickly. They've in fact got the same poison blood she does. Now the Hydra priest that we've seen, that can heal up units, and it can also cause a bit of a poison area effect, which is pretty good, but can also hurt your units too. It's actually very powerful. You've got to be careful where you place this. I've made this mistake a lot of times. But if you're looking for units that are just up close and personal, being able to do some damage, and with some decent poison arrow range too, these will be the ones that are perfect for you. Cerberus and his special units are also rather different too, so each of the different big beasties have their own special quirks. We're not showing off any sort of mechanics and so on, and those will be featured in another video, but this is centered around what it can do. And the fact is that Cerberus is able to do quite a lot of damage, is able to move around very quickly and catch any enemies off guard, cause a rather decent fire explosion, which does get a decent amount of area, nothing too big but big enough, and also destroy enemy morale. The fact is that Cerberus is just a giant big three-headed dog, which acts like a war dog, as you can imagine, just very, very powerful. Of course, it can also summon in some units too, which I believe might be the only thing which can summon in this game at the moment. I've not seen anything else. The units themselves, well, they're just basic ethereal units. If you're used to using them in Warhammer, it's ghostly units, they take less damage, and they'll be able to hold on a lot longer. The fact is that they're actually pretty good for holding down enemy lines, and you can do quite a lot with them. If you manage to pin down your enemy in a choke point with these ethereal units, you can hold them off for quite some time, whilst you work around and try to get them from the rear, or have some archers peppering from above. It really depends on how you play. And of course, you now know that obviously each of the big monsters are tied to their own specific units. It really depends on how you prefer your playstyle, and videos will soon come out regarding that type of stuff soon. But let me know what you guys think regarding these units, the changes, the stats, and so on, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel has been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.